The road to Northwood Lodge stretched out before them like a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the frozen Minnesota landscape. Daniel Reeves kept his hands steady on the wheel, his knuckles showing white through the skin as he gripped tighter than necessary. In the rearview mirror, he could see Sophie's small face pressed against the window, her breath fogging the glass as she traced patterns with her finger. "Daddy, look! A deer!" He glanced where she pointed, catching the flash of brown disappearing into the pine trees. "I see it, sweetheart." From the passenger seat, Melissa scrolled through her phone without looking up. The blue light cast strange shadows across her face, making her look older than 35. Or maybe she just looked tired. Daniel couldn't remember the last time he'd seen her smile at him. Really smile, not the tight-lipped expression she wore when her mother was watching. "How much longer?" Melissa asked, her tone flat. "About 40 minutes. Daniel checked the GPS mounted on the dashboard. "We're making good time. Mother's been texting. She says the room better be nice this time. After that disaster in Brainerd." The room in Brainerd was fine. Daniel kept his voice even, though his jaw tightened. "The heating went out. That wasn't my fault." Melissa made a small noise that might have been agreement or dismissal. He couldn't tell anymore. She'd stopped defending him years ago, right around the time Sophie was born, and Eleanor Briggs had moved from occasional visits to constant presence in their lives. The Northwood Lodge appeared through the trees like something from a postcard, all timber and stone, with smoke curling from multiple chimneys into the gray November sky. Daniel felt a small flutter of hope in his chest. Maybe this would be different. Maybe 3 days away from the familiar battlegrounds of home would let them reset, remember why they'd chosen each other in the first place. He pulled into the parking lot, the tires crunching over gravel and thin ice. Eleanor's silver Lexus was already there, parked at an angle that took up 2 spaces. "Grandma!" Sophie unbuckled herself before Daniel could put the car in park, her excitement infectious despite everything. She loved her grandmother with a pure, uncomplicated love that only children can manage, not understanding yet that love should flow in both directions. Eleanor emerged from the lodge's entrance, her wool coat perfectly tailored, her silver hair swept back in a style that probably cost more than Daniel made in a week. She opened her arms for Sophie, but her eyes were on Daniel, cold and assessing. "There's my girl." Eleanor hugged Sophie briefly before setting her down. "You're getting so big. Almost too big for hugs." Sophie's smile faltered. Daniel moved to stand beside his daughter, resting his hand on her shoulder. "Hello, Eleanor." "Daniel." She said his name like it tasted bad. "I see you managed to find the place." The directions weren't too complicated. GPS worked fine. Modern technology. What would we do without it? Her tone suggested she thought Daniel would be lost without it. She turned to Melissa, her expression softening. "Darling, you look exhausted. Was the drive terrible?" "It was fine, Mother." But Melissa's voice had changed, taking on a younger, more uncertain quality. She always regressed around Eleanor, became a child seeking approval. They walked into the lodge together, Eleanor leading the way like she owned the place. The interior was warm, smelling of wood smoke and coffee. A fire crackled in a massive stone fireplace, and deer heads mounted on the walls stared down with glass eyes. Sophie pointed at them, fascinated. "Can we go see the lake, Daddy? After we get settled in." Daniel approached the front desk, pulling out his wallet. The clerk, a young man with red cheeks and a friendly smile, checked them in efficiently. "You'll be in rooms 204 and 206, the clerk said. "Connecting rooms, just like you requested." "Connecting rooms?" Eleanor's voice cut through the lobby. "How cozy." Daniel took the key cards without responding. He learned years ago that defending his choices to Eleanor only made things worse. She had a gift for twisting words, for making reasonable decisions sound like character flaws. They took the elevator to the 2nd floor. The hallway was carpeted in burgundy, with brass sconces providing warm light. Daniel unlocked room 204 first, the room for him, Melissa, and Sophie. It was nice. Better than nice. 2 queen beds with handmade quilts, a sitting area with a view of the frozen lake, and a small table with a coffee maker and complimentary cookies. Sophie immediately claimed the bed nearest the window, bouncing on it with delight. "Careful, honey," Daniel said, but he was smiling. Eleanor appeared in the doorway, surveying the room with the expression of someone who'd found mold in the bathroom. This is what you chose. What's wrong with it? Daniel heard the edge in his voice and tried to soften it. This was supposed to be a peaceful weekend. Nothing, I suppose. If you like quaint. She moved to the window, her arms crossed. The view is partially blocked by that pine tree, and the carpet looks worn near the door. It's a lodge. Mother, not the Ritz-Carlton, Melissa said, but there was no heat in her defense. She was already unpacking, arranging her toiletries on the bathroom counter with mechanical precision. Yes, well, Eleanor moved toward the connecting door between the rooms. I suppose my room is through here? Yes. Daniel handed her the second key card, feeling Sophie's arms wrap around his legs. She was picking up on the tension, the way children always do. We thought it would be nice to be close. Eleanor took the key card between two fingers, as if it might be contaminated. How thoughtful. She disappeared through the connecting door, and Daniel heard her opening drawers and closets in the next room. Melissa emerged from the bathroom, her face carefully neutral. We should go down to dinner soon, she said. Mother gets irritable when she's hungry. Daniel bit back the response that Eleanor seemed irritable most of the time, hungry or not. Instead, he helped Sophie change into a clean sweater and combed her dark hair, so much like his own, into two neat ponytails. The dining room was nearly empty when they arrived. The dinner rush hadn't started yet, giving them their choice of tables. Daniel selected one near the fireplace, thinking Sophie would enjoy watching the flames. Eleanor frowned at the proximity to the heat, but sat without comment. Dinner was a minefield. Daniel ordered a burger, which prompted Eleanor to comment on his cholesterol. Sophie asked for chicken fingers, which Eleanor said would make her fat. Melissa ordered a salad and pushed it around her plate, eating almost nothing. By the time dessert arrived, Daniel's shoulders were so tense they ached. Can I be excused? Sophie asked quietly. She'd barely touched her ice cream. Of course, sweetheart. Daniel reached over to wipe a smudge of chocolate from her chin. Don't go far, okay? Just around the lobby. I'll be careful, Daddy. She slipped away from the table, and Daniel watched her go with a mixture of relief and guilt. 6 years old, and already she knew when to make herself scarce. You indulge her, Eleanor said, sipping her wine. She's a child. She's spoiled. You never set boundaries. Daniel set down his fork carefully, the metal clinking against the plate. She's well-behaved, Eleanor. Her teachers say she's one of the best students in her class. For now. But children need structure. Discipline. My daughter was raised properly, and look how well she turned out. Daniel looked at Melissa, really looked at her. She was staring at her plate, her jaw tight, her shoulders hunched. She looked miserable. Was this what Eleanor considered turning out well? I'm sure you did your best, Daniel said neutrally. After dinner, they returned to their rooms. Eleanor immediately retreated through the connecting door, closing it firmly behind her. Melissa went straight to bed, claiming exhaustion. Daniel sat with Sophie while she colored in a book she'd brought from home, her small hand moving crayons across paper in careful strokes. Are you having fun, Pumpkin? She looked up at him with those serious brown eyes, too serious for 6. Grandma doesn't like me very much, does she? The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Of course she does. She has a different way of showing love. But even as he said it, he wondered if it was a lie. He'd never seen Eleanor show Sophie genuine affection. Gifts, yes. Expensive toys that Sophie never quite seemed to want. But warmth? Patience? Tenderness? No, never those things. It's okay, Daddy. Sophie went back to her coloring. I have you. Daniel kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. Always, sweetheart. Always. That night, lying in bed beside Melissa's sleeping form, Daniel stared at the ceiling and wondered why he'd thought this trip would fix anything. The same patterns played out no matter where they were. Eleanor's cruelty disguised as concern, Melissa's silence and complicity, Sophie absorbing it all like a sponge. And him, always trying to be the buffer, the shock absorber, catching the blows meant for his daughter and swallowing his own hurt to keep the peace. He could hear the wind outside, rattling the windows. Snow was coming. He could smell it in the air. Morning came cold and bright. Daniel woke to find Sophie, already awake, sitting cross-legged on her bed and looking out at the lake. The surface was frozen, dusted with new snow that sparkled in the sunrise. "Morning, Angel." "Morning, Daddy. Can we go ice skating?" "I don't think the ice is thick enough yet, but maybe we can go for a walk after breakfast." Melissa stirred, rolling over and checking her phone immediately. Daniel had given up commenting on that habit years ago. He got dressed quietly, then helped Sophie into warm clothes. Layers upon layers, the way you had a dress in Minnesota winters. The breakfast buffet was set up in the same dining room. Daniel loaded a plate with eggs and bacon, while Sophie carefully selected fruit and a waffle. Melissa took coffee and toast. Eleanor arrived last, looking immaculate in a cashmere sweater set, her makeup perfect. "The bed was lumpy," she announced as she sat down, "and there was noise all night. People in the hallway." "I didn't hear anything," Daniel said. "Well, you wouldn't, would you? You sleep like the dead." Eleanor poured herself coffee from the carafe. "Must be nice, not being bothered by anything." The implication was clear, that he was inconsiderate, oblivious to others' discomfort. Daniel took a bite of eggs and said nothing. After breakfast, Eleanor announced she wanted to walk around the grounds. Melissa immediately offered to join her, and they left together, leaving Daniel and Sophie alone in the lobby. "Want to explore?" Daniel asked. Sophie nodded enthusiastically, and they spent the next hour wandering the lodge. They found a game room with an old pool table and a dusty foosball table. Sophie wasn't tall enough to play properly, but Daniel lifted her so she could shoot the cue ball, and her delighted laughter echoed off the wood-paneled walls. They discovered a small library with sagging shelves full of paperback mysteries and romance novels. Sophie picked out a picture book about a moose, and Daniel read it to her in an oversized armchair while the morning light streamed through the windows. These moments, just him and Sophie, no Eleanor to criticize, no Melissa to worry about pleasing. These were when Daniel felt most like himself, most like a good father, a good man. "I love you, Daddy," Sophie said suddenly, looking up from the book. "I love you too, sweetheart, more than anything." They were heading back toward the rooms when they ran into Melissa and Eleanor in the hallway. Both women looked cold, their cheeks red from the wind outside. "There you are," Melissa said. "We were looking for you. We've been here the whole time." Daniel ruffled Sophie's hair. "Just hanging out." Eleanor's gaze swept over them, and her lip curled slightly. "I need a rest before lunch." The walk was exhausting. "I'll come with you, Mother," Melissa said quickly. They disappeared into Eleanor's room through the connecting door, leaving it open. Daniel heard them talking in low voices, though he couldn't make out the words. He had the feeling they were discussing him. They usually were. Sophie tugged on his hand. "Can I go play in the hallway?" The hallway was empty, carpeted and quiet. Daniel could see both ends from where he stood. "Okay, but stay where I can see you." Sophie took off her shoes. She hated wearing shoes indoors, and began running up and down the hallway in her socks, sliding on the carpet and giggling. Daniel leaned against the wall near their door, watching her, feeling some of the tension drain from his shoulders. This was good. Let her be a kid. Let her play. The other guests they'd seen at breakfast had gone out for the day. The hallway was peaceful, just the muffled sound of Sophie's feet on carpet and her quiet laughter. Daniel checked his phone, answering a text from his boss about a difficult repair job waiting for him on Monday. He didn't see Eleanor emerge from her room, didn't hear her approach Sophie, but he heard his daughter scream. Daniel's head snapped up. Sophie was standing in the middle of the hallway, her face crumpling, tears already streaming down her cheeks. Eleanor stood in her doorway, her arms crossed, her expression cold. "What happened?" Daniel was moving before he finished the question, reaching Sophie and dropping to his knees. "What's wrong, baby?" Sophie threw her arms around his neck, sobbing. She pushed me. Grandma pushed me." Daniel looked up at Eleanor. She stared back at him, unbothered, unmoved. She was being loud. Eleanor said calmly, "This is for adults, not for children to play in like it's a playground. She's 6 years old." Daniel stood, lifting Sophie into his arms. She buried her face in his shoulder, her small body shaking. She was just playing. She was disturbing people, running around barefoot like some kind of wild animal. Eleanor's voice was sharp, cutting. But I suppose that's what happens when children aren't taught proper behavior. Melissa appeared behind her mother, and Daniel's heart sank at the expression on his wife's face. Not concern, not anger on Sophie's behalf, just irritation. Daniel, what's going on? Your mother pushed our daughter. I did not push her, Eleanor said. I redirected her. There's a difference. She's crying because she's being dramatic. Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. Typical child behavior when they don't get their way. Daniel felt something crack inside him. It was a small sound, barely audible, like ice breaking under pressure. He'd heard so many cutting remarks over the years, swallowed so much criticism, let so many slights go unanswered for the sake of peace. But this, his daughter, crying in his arms because her grandmother had put hands on her, this was different. Melissa, he said quietly, tell your mother this isn't okay. Melissa shifted her weight, her gaze dropping to the floor. Sophie does need to learn manners, Daniel. She can't just run wild everywhere we go. The crack widened. Are you serious? She embarrasses us, Melissa continued, her voice rising slightly. Do you know what Mother said during our walk? That Sophie is out of control, that you don't discipline her properly. And maybe she's right. Maybe if you actually parented instead of just being her friend. Get your things, Daniel said. What? Get your things. We're leaving. Eleanor laughed. Actually laughed. Don't be ridiculous. We paid for 3 nights. I don't care. Daniel adjusted Sophie in his arms. She'd stopped crying, but was still trembling. Sophie, go get your bag. Put all your toys and clothes in it, okay? Daniel, you're overreacting, Melissa said, but there was uncertainty creeping into her voice now. Am I? He looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. Your mother just pushed our daughter. And instead of protecting her, you're defending it. Tell me, Mel, when did that become okay? When did protecting your mother's feelings become more important than our child's safety? Melissa's face flushed. You're being dramatic. No, I'm being a father. Daniel turned toward their room, still carrying Sophie. Pack your things or don't. But we're leaving. He helped Sophie gather her belongings, his hands steady despite the rage burning in his chest. The anger felt good, clean. For years, he'd swallowed his feelings, let them fester and rot inside him, because keeping the peace seemed like the right thing to do. But peace at what cost? His daughter's dignity? Her sense of safety? He was done. Melissa followed them into the room, her phone in her hand. Mother's very upset. Good. Daniel zipped Sophie's bag closed. She should be. Where are you even going? Home. With my family. He emphasized the last word deliberately. I'm your family. Are you? Daniel met her eyes. Because right now, it seems like you're Eleanor's daughter first and Sophie's mother second. And that's not good enough anymore. He took Sophie's hand and walked past Melissa, past Eleanor who stood in the hallway with her arms crossed and her face twisted in indignation. He didn't stop, didn't look back, just kept walking, one foot in front of the other, while his daughter's small hand gripped as tightly. The drive home was silent. Sophie fell asleep within the first 30 minutes, exhausted from crying and emotions too big for her small body to contain. Daniel kept the radio off, his mind racing. The house felt different when they returned. Daniel carried Sophie inside, her sleeping form warm and heavy in his arms. He laid her in her bed, tucking the blankets around her carefully. She stirred but didn't wake, and he stood there for a long moment, watching her breathe. In the living room, he pulled out his phone and made a call he'd been thinking about for months. Anderson Locksmith. Hi, I need all my locks changed. Today, if possible. There was a pause. It's Saturday afternoon, so there'll be an emergency fee. That's fine. How soon can you get here? 2 hours later, a gray van pulled into the driveway. The locksmith was an older man named Pete with kind eyes and efficient hands. He didn't ask questions, just got to work changing the locks on both the front and back doors, plus the garage. Domestic situation? Pete asked quietly as he worked on the deadbolt. Something like that. Pete nodded. Seen it before. Good for you, taking action. He handed Daniel 3 new keys. Change a garage door code too, if you've got one. And if you've got any windows that don't lock properly, get those fixed next. Thank you. After Pete left, Daniel made coffee and sat at the kitchen table. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the wind rattling the windows. He knew Melissa would come home eventually, knew there would be a confrontation, but for the first time in years, he wasn't dreading it. Wasn't already planning his apology to keep the peace. He was done apologizing for doing the right thing. Sophie woke around dinner time. Daniel made her favorite grilled cheese and tomato soup, and they ate together at the small kitchen table. She didn't ask about Melissa, didn't ask when they were going back to the lodge. She just ate her sandwich and colored in her coloring book, and Daniel was grateful for her resilience. Daddy, yes, sweetheart. Are you mad at Mommy? The question stopped him. He set down his spoon carefully. I'm disappointed. There's a difference. What's disappointed mean? It means, I thought Mommy would make a different choice. A better choice. He reached across the table and took Sophie's small hand. But I'm not mad at you, and I will always, always protect you. Understand? She nodded solemnly. I understand. That night, Daniel heard a car pull into the driveway. He'd been expecting it, but his heart still beat faster when he heard footsteps on the porch, then the sound of a key trying to fit into a lock that had been changed. Silence. Then pounding. Daniel, open this door. He approached slowly, turning on the porch light. Through the decorative glass, he could see Melissa's silhouette, her hand raised to knock again. Daniel. He opened the door, but positioned himself in the doorway, blocking entry. Melissa looked disheveled, her hair coming loose from its usual neat style, her eyes red-rimmed. You can't lock me out of my own house. It's my house too, Daniel said quietly. And right now, I need some space. Space? You dragged our daughter away from a family vacation because of a little disagreement. Your mother physically pushed Sophie. That's not a little disagreement. Melissa's face twisted. She barely touched her. Sophie was being a brat, running around and making noise. She's 6. She needs to learn. God, Daniel, you're so soft with her. You let her get away with everything, and then you wonder why she doesn't respect authority. Stop. Daniel held up a hand. Just stop. Listen to yourself. You're defending your mother pushing our daughter. Defending it. Do you even hear how that sounds? Melissa's jaw trembled. You're trying to turn my family against me. Your mother did that all by herself. Daniel's voice remained level, controlled. You can come home when she apologizes to Sophie. A real apology, not some dismissive non-apology. Until then, maybe stay with her, since she seems to matter more anyway. That's not fair. Fair. Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that every birthday party, every holiday, every family dinner for the past 6 years has been about managing your mother's feelings? Is it fair that I have to explain to Sophie why Grandma doesn't hug her? Why Grandma criticizes everything she does? Is it fair that my daughter came to me today, crying because the person who's supposed to love her pushed her away? Melissa opened her mouth, closed it. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't know how to choose between you and my mother. Then you've already chosen. Daniel started to close the door. Wait, I'm tired, Mel. I'm so tired of being the bad guy for wanting my daughter to be treated with basic kindness. So until things change, we need space. Real space. He closed the door gently but firmly. Heard Melissa crying on the other side. He waited, listening, until he heard her footsteps retreating, her car starting, the sound of tires on the driveway. Then he locked the new deadbolt and leaned his forehead against the door. The next morning was Sunday. Daniel took Sophie to her favorite diner for pancakes, and they spent the afternoon at the park despite the cold. She needed normalcy, needed to remember that life could be simple and good. That evening, his phone started ringing. Eleanor's number. He declined the call. She called again, and again. On the 4th attempt, he answered. What? Don't you dare use that tone with me. Eleanor's voice was ice. You've turned my daughter against me. No, Eleanor. You did that yourself when you put your hands on my daughter. I barely touched the child. Her name is Sophie. Whatever. The point is, you're being completely unreasonable. Melissa is devastated. She came home in tears. How dare you lock her out of her own home? Where did she go, Eleanor? A pause. She's staying with me, obviously. Someone needs to take care of her. Of course she is. Daniel moved to the window, watching Sophie draw with chalk on the driveway. Let me ask you something. Do you even like Sophie? And I don't mean do you love her because she's your granddaughter. I mean, do you actually like her as a person? What kind of question? Because I don't think you do. I think you resent her. Maybe because she exists. Maybe because she tied Melissa to me. Maybe just because she's a child and children are inconvenient. But whatever the reason, it shows. Every time you look at her, every time you talk to her, it shows. How dare you psychoanalyze me? I'm not analyzing anything. I'm just stating facts. Daniel's voice remained calm, which seemed to infuriate Eleanor more. And here's another fact. You're not welcome in my daughter's life until you can treat her with respect. Real respect, not the conditional kind you give Melissa. You can't keep me from my granddaughter. Watch me. He hung up, blocked her number, then called his lawyer, a guy he'd known from high school who'd gone into family law. Tom, it's Daniel Reeves. I need to talk to you about some legal stuff. Monday morning brought work, which was a relief. Daniel lost himself in the familiar rhythm of the garage, the smell of motor oil and metal, the satisfying click of tools, the straightforward logic of machines. Engines made sense. You could see what was broken and fix it. He was underneath a Chevy Malibu when his phone rang. The garage secretary poked her head into the bay. Daniel? There's a call from Sophie's school. His stomach dropped. He rolled out from under the car, wiping his hands on a rag as he headed for the office phone. This is Daniel Reeves. Mr. Reeves, this is Principal Anderson at Lakeview Elementary. There's been an incident involving Sophie. Is she hurt? No, she's fine. But there was a situation today, at pickup time. A woman claiming to be Sophie's grandmother attempted to take her from school without authorization. Daniel closed his eyes. Eleanor Briggs. Yes. She became quite agitated when the teacher explained our pickup procedures. The principal paused. She said some inappropriate things to Sophie directly. Our staff had to ask her to leave the premises. What did she say? I think it would be better if you came to the school. Sophie is in my office, and she's quite upset. Daniel was in his car within 3 minutes. He found Sophie sitting in a chair that was too big for her, hugging a stuffed rabbit someone had given her. Her face was blotchy from crying, and when she saw Daniel, she burst into fresh tears. Daddy! He gathered her up, holding her tight. Over her head, he met Principal Anderson's eyes. What happened? Ms. Briggs arrived at dismissal time and told Sophie's teacher that there had been a family emergency and she needed to take Sophie immediately. Mrs. Patterson, Sophie's teacher, knows our procedures require prior authorization for any changes to pickup, so she asked Ms. Briggs to wait while she called the main office. That's when Grandma got mad. Sophie whispered against Daniel's chest. Principal Anderson nodded. Yes. Ms. Briggs became quite hostile. She raised her voice, insisted she had every right to take her granddaughter, and when Sophie started to cry, the principal looked uncomfortable. She told Sophie she was an ungrateful child who had ruined her mother's life. The words landed like physical blows. Daniel felt Sophie flinch in his arms. In front of other students? I'm afraid so. Mrs. Patterson immediately called security, and we asked Ms. Briggs to leave. She went, but not without causing quite a scene. Principal Anderson leaned forward. Mr. Reeves, I need to ask, is there a custody situation we should be aware of? Do we need to update Sophie's pickup authorization? Yes. Daniel's jaw was tight. Remove Eleanor Briggs entirely. Only Melissa or I are authorized. And if Eleanor shows up again, call the police immediately. Understood. The principal made a note. Sophie, honey, why don't you go sit with Mrs. Chun in the nurse's office for a moment? She has some cookies. Once Sophie was gone, Principal Anderson's expression grew serious. Mr. Reeves, in situations like this, we're mandated to document everything. I'll be making a formal report of today's incident. If you're considering legal action, this documentation will be available. Thank you. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. I'm sorry she caused problems here. Don't apologize. We're here to protect the children. That's our priority. She stood, extending her hand. Take care of Sophie. She's a sweet girl. Whatever's happening at home, don't let it dim that light in her. Daniel took Sophie home early. He made hot chocolate with extra marshmallows and let her watch cartoons while he sat at the kitchen table, his phone in front of him. He called the police non-emergency line. I need to report harassment and attempted child removal from school without authorization. The officer who arrived 30 minutes later was a woman named Officer Martinez. She was patient and thorough, taking down every detail about Eleanor's behavior at the lodge, the phone calls, and now the incident at school. Has she made any threats? Not directly. Just constant contact. Calls, voicemails. My wife, my separated wife, is staying with her, and I think Eleanor sees this as some kind of war. Officer Martinez nodded. Unfortunately, until there's an explicit threat or she violates a court order, our hands are somewhat tied. But she tapped her pen against her notepad. You can file for a restraining order. Given what happened at the school, especially the verbal abuse directed at your daughter in front of witnesses, you might have grounds. How do I do that? She pulled a form from her folder. Start here. Document everything, dates, times, what was said, who witnessed it. Get a statement from the school. Your lawyer can help you file. After Officer Martinez left, Daniel called Tom. I need to file for a restraining order. And he took a deep breath. I think I need to file for divorce. In full custody. There was a pause on the other end of the line. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. Okay, come on my office tomorrow. Bring all your documentation. We'll start the paperwork. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Melissa called. Not Eleanor's number, her own. Daniel, Mel, I heard about what happened at the school. Then you know your mother is out of control. She's just upset. She feels like you're trying to erase her from Sophie's life. I'm trying to protect our daughter from someone who verbally abuses her. Daniel's voice rose, and he forced himself to lower it. Mel, do you understand what Eleanor said to Sophie today? In front of her classmates? In front of her teacher? Silence. She told our 6-year-old daughter that she's ungrateful and has ruined your life. 6 years old, Mel. Sophie's 6. And she had to hear that from her own grandmother while her friends watched. Mother didn't mean. Stop. Daniel cut her off. Stop defending her. Just for once, stop defending her and think about what this is doing to Sophie. To us. To you. I don't know how to do this without my mother. Then maybe you need to figure that out. Daniel's voice was tired now. All the anger draining away into something harder and sadder. I filed for divorce today, and for a restraining order against Eleanor. Melissa gasped. You what? I'm done, Mel. I'm done watching you choose your mother over our daughter. I'm done being the villain because I think children deserve kindness. I'm done. You can't just. I can. I did. He paused. You're welcome to come see Sophie. But Eleanor isn't. Not until she can act like an adult and apologize for hurting a child. She'll never apologize. You know that. Then I guess you have a choice to make. He hung up before she could respond. The week that followed was a blur of paperwork and court filings. Tom was efficient, thorough. Daniel provided everything. Recordings of Eleanor's voicemails. He'd started saving them after the school incident. The police report, a statement from Principal Anderson. Even the testimony of the hotel manager from Northwood Lodge, who remembered the incident and agreed to provide video footage from a hallway. This is good, Tom said, reviewing the files. Very good. The pattern of behavior is clear, and the fact that she attempted to remove Sophie from school without authorization, that's serious. What about Melissa? Tom's expression grew more somber. Custody battles are never easy, but you have some strong factors in your favor. You're the primary caretaker. You handle school pickup, doctor's appointments, day-to-day care. Melissa's living with the person you're filing a restraining order against, which shows poor judgment regarding Sophie's safety. And we have multiple witnesses to Eleanor's behavior, including school staff. What are our chances? I'd say good. Better than good, actually. But be prepared. This is going to get ugly. Eleanor isn't going to go down without a fight. Tom was right. The next few weeks were a nightmare. Eleanor hired an expensive lawyer and fought the restraining order viciously. She painted Daniel as controlling, claimed Sophie's tears were manipulated, insisted she was just trying to instill proper discipline. But the evidence was overwhelming. The hotel video footage showed exactly what had happened in that hallway. Sophie playing harmlessly, Eleanor shoving her hard enough that the child stumbled, Sophie's obvious distress. The school's testimony was damning. Eleanor's own voicemails, played back in court, revealed her true nature. And then something happened that Daniel hadn't anticipated. Melissa showed up to one of the preliminary hearings, alone. She looked thin, tired. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her hands shook as she approached him in the courthouse hallway. "Daniel, can we talk? Is Eleanor here?" "No, I came alone." Melissa glanced around nervously, as if her mother might materialize from the walls. "I've been thinking about everything." "Okay, I went through your recordings, the ones from Mother's voicemails." Her voice cracked. "I never realized how she sounded when you weren't around. How she talked about Sophie." Daniel waited. "She called her a mistake. Said Sophie ruined my life, ruined my chances at a real future." Tears spilled down Melissa's cheeks. "I've been so focused on keeping Mother happy, on being a good daughter, that I stopped being a mother at all. Didn't I?" "Mel." "No, it's true. I let her push my daughter. Defended it. Defended her even when she showed up at Sophie's school and screamed at her in front of everyone." Melissa wiped her eyes roughly. "I don't know who I am without my mother telling me what to think, but I know I don't like who I've become." Daniel felt something twist in his chest. Not quite hope, but something softer than the anger he'd been carrying. "So what are you going to do about it?" "I'm moving out of Mother's house. I'm going to testify against her at the hearing." Melissa met his eyes. "I'm not asking you to forgive me or take me back. I know I destroyed that, but I want to do right by Sophie, even if it's too late." "It's not too late." Daniel's voice was quiet. "Not for her. She's 6. She'll forgive you if you show up. If you choose her. I want to choose her. I just don't know if I'm strong enough." "Then you better figure out, because Sophie deserves a mother who'll protect her, who'll stand between her and the cruelty of the world, not add to it." Melissa nodded, still crying. "I know." The night before Eleanor's sentencing, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with coffee going cold in front of him. Sophie was asleep upstairs, tucked under her quilts with her stuffed animals arranged around her like a protective fortress. His phone buzzed. "A text from Melissa. I testified today. Told him everything. I'm so sorry." He didn't reply. Couldn't find the words. The courtroom was wood-paneled and solemn, with high windows that let in cold November light. Daniel sat beside Tom at the plaintiff's table, his hands folded in his lap, his heart beating steadily. Eleanor sat across the aisle with her lawyer, her back straight, her expression icy. She wore an expensive suit and had her hair done. She looked like someone who'd never been challenged in her life, who'd never faced consequences for the small cruelty she'd inflicted. That was about to change. The judge, a woman in her 50s named Judge Patterson, reviewed the case file with meticulous attention. She asked questions, listened to testimony, watched the hotel security footage without expression. Then the hotel manager took the stand, a middle-aged man named Jim Peterson who'd worked at Northwood Lodge for 15 years. "I reviewed the footage after Mr. Reeves inquired about it," Jim said, his voice clear and steady. "The hallway camera captured the entire incident." "What did you observe?" the prosecutor asked. "The child, Sophie, was playing in the hallway, running, sliding on the carpet in her socks. Typical kid behavior. She wasn't being loud, wasn't bothering anyone. The hallway was empty except for her and her father, who was supervising from nearby." Jim paused. Then Eleanor Briggs emerged from a room. The child didn't see her immediately. When Mrs. Briggs reached her, she didn't speak or try to redirect the child verbally. She just put both hands on the child's shoulders and shoved her, hard enough that Sophie stumbled and almost fell. What happened next? Sophie started crying immediately, loudly. That's when the father noticed and came running. Mrs. Briggs showed no concern, no remorse. She stood there with her arms crossed while the child cried. Eleanor's lawyer tried to minimize the footage, to suggest it was ambiguous. But Judge Patterson had seen it herself. There was nothing ambiguous about a grown woman putting her hands on a crying child. Principal Anderson testified next, describing the school incident with clinical precision. The verbal abuse, the unauthorized pickup attempt, Sophie's distress. Then, to everyone's surprise, Melissa took the stand. She looked fragile, sitting in the witness chair. Her voice shook as she answered questions. "Tell us about your relationship with your mother," the prosecutor said. "It's complicated. She raised me alone after my father left. She was very involved in my life. Made all my decisions, really. Who I dated, what I studied, where I worked." Melissa twisted her hands together. "When I met Daniel, she didn't approve. Said he wasn't good enough. But I loved him, so I married him anyway. I thought it would get better. Did it? No. If anything, it got worse after Sophie was born. Mother criticized everything. How we decorated the nursery, what we named her, how Daniel held her. But I was so used to deferring to Mother's judgment that I just went along with it. I thought she knew best. And the incident at the hotel." Melissa's eyes filled with tears. "I heard Sophie crying in the hallway. Ran to see what happened. Mother said she'd been loud, needed to be taught a lesson. And I believed her, sided with her, told my husband he was overreacting. Do you regret that?" "More than anything." Melissa looked directly at the judge. "I failed my daughter. I let my mother hurt her, and then I defended it. I was a terrible mother. What changed? I listened to the voicemails Mother had been leaving for Daniel. Heard the things she said about Sophie when she thought no one was listening. She called her a mistake, a burden. Said Sophie had ruined my life." Melissa wiped her eyes. "That's when I realized my mother doesn't love Sophie. Maybe she never did. And I've been so desperate for Mother's approval that I chose it over my own child's well-being." Eleanor's face remained impassive during all of this, but her hands gripped the armrests of her chair tightly enough that her knuckles showed white. The prosecutor played the voicemails. Eleanor's voice echoed through the courtroom, dripping with contempt. "That man has poisoned you against me. Your daughter is completely out of control. Just like her father, she's a burden you never should have carried. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of father he is." Judge Patterson's expression darkened with each message. Finally, Eleanor's lawyer called her to testify in her own defense. "It was a mistake. Mrs. Briggs," the prosecutor began, "do you believe you did anything wrong at the hotel?" "Absolutely not. The child was misbehaving. Someone needed to correct her. By physically pushing her, I redirected her. Gently. The video shows you shoving a 6-year-old child hard enough that she stumbled and cried. Do you call that gentle?" Eleanor's jaw tightened. She was being dramatic. Children manipulate with tears. "And at the school, when you called Sophie ungrateful and told her she'd ruined her mother's life, I was upset. My daughter had just been alienated from me by that man." She pointed at Daniel. "He's controlling, manipulative. He's turned everyone against me. Did you or did you not attempt to remove Sophie from school without authorization?" "I'm her grandmother. I have rights." "That's not what I asked." Eleanor's composure cracked. "Yes, I tried to pick her up because I was worried about her. Because her father was clearly unfit." "Unfit how?" "He lets her run wild. No discipline, no structure. That child needs a firm hand, and he refuses to provide it. What you describe as no discipline is what most would call appropriate parenting of a 6-year-old. And what you describe as a firm hand appears to include physical aggression and verbal abuse." Eleanor's face flushed. "I was never abusive. I was raised with discipline, and I turned out just fine." The prosecutor glanced at the file in front of her. "Did you?" "According to testimony, your daughter is so desperate for your approval that she prioritized your feelings over her own child's safety. You've alienated your son-in-law and traumatized your granddaughter. You attempted to unlawfully remove a child from school. You left multiple threatening voicemails. Mrs. Briggs, I would not describe that as turning out fine." Eleanor had no response. Judge Patterson called a brief recess. When court reconvened, her expression was grave. "I've reviewed all evidence, heard all testimony, and watched the security footage multiple times," she began. "This is one of the clearer cases I've encountered. Mrs. Briggs, your behavior toward your granddaughter has been reprehensible. You physically assaulted her, verbally abused her, attempted to remove her from school without authorization, and have shown absolutely no remorse for any of it." Eleanor opened her mouth to object. Judge Patterson held up a hand. "Your testimony only reinforced my assessment. You show no understanding of appropriate boundaries with children. You refer to normal child behavior as wild and believe physical correction is appropriate for a 6-year-old who is simply playing. Most concerning is your complete inability to see how your actions have harmed this child. The judge shuffled papers. The restraining order is granted. You are to have no contact, direct or indirect, with Sophie Reeves. No phone calls, no emails, no social media contact, no third-party communications. You will not go to her school, her home, or any location where she is known to be. This order will remain in effect for 2 years, at which point it can be reviewed. Eleanor shot to her feet. You can't do this. She's my granddaughter. Sit down, Mrs. Briggs. The judge's voice was sharp. You're lucky I'm not adding contempt of court to your problems. But Eleanor wasn't finished. As the bailiff approached, she turned to where Daniel sat, her face twisted with rage. This is your fault. You took everything from me. My daughter, my granddaughter. You poisoned them against me. Mrs. Briggs, that child was a mistake from the start. Melissa should have focused on her career, on her future, not on playing house with some low-class mechanic. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Patterson's expression turned to ice. Mrs. Briggs, I'm adding child endangerment charges based on the hotel incident. And given what you just said in open court about a 6-year-old child, I'm also recommending a psychological evaluation before any consideration of contact restoration. Eleanor kept shouting as the bailiff escorted her out. She needed discipline. Someone had to teach her. You're all too soft, too weak. The door closed behind her, cutting off her voice. Judge Patterson rubbed her temples. Mr. Reeves, I apologize you and your daughter had to endure this. The restraining order is in full effect immediately. If she violates it, call the police without hesitation. Daniel nodded, unable to speak around the emotion lodged in his throat. As for the child endangerment charges, the judge looked at her notes. Given Mrs. Briggs's complete lack of remorse and her concerning statements about discipline, I'm recommending 6 months in county jail, followed by mandatory counseling and a permanent note in her record. This will affect any future custody or visitation rights regarding minors. 6 months. Daniel felt the tension he'd been carrying for weeks finally start to ease. 2 weeks later, Eleanor was sentenced. She stood before the judge with her lawyer, her face blank and cold. Do you have anything to say? Judge Patterson asked. The child needed discipline, Eleanor repeated, as if this explained everything. Someone had to teach her proper behavior. Mrs. Briggs, a 6-year-old child playing in a hallway, does not need to be disciplined. She needs to be allowed to be a child. The judge's voice was weary. Your inability to understand that, even now, tells me this sentence is appropriate. 6 months in county jail, 2 years probation upon release, mandatory counseling, and the restraining order remains in full effect. Eleanor showed no reaction. No tears, no anger. Just emptiness. Melissa didn't attend the sentencing. She sent Daniel a text. I can't watch. Is that cowardly? He replied, it's human. Focus on Sophie. Because that's what Melissa was doing now, slowly, carefully, building a relationship with her daughter. She'd moved into a small apartment across town, away from Eleanor's house and Eleanor's influence. She came to see Sophie twice a week, taking her for ice cream or to the park, never pushing, just being present. Sophie was wary at first, but children are resilient. Children forgive. One afternoon, as Daniel was putting groceries away, Melissa appeared at the door. She looked better, healthier, like someone who'd been sick for a long time and was finally starting to heal. Can we talk? They sat at the kitchen table while Sophie played in the living room. Daniel poured coffee, waiting. I started therapy, Melissa said. A real therapist, not one of Mother's approved doctors. She specializes in family systems and emotional enmeshment. That's good. I'm learning a lot. About myself, about Mother, about how messed up my normal meter has always been. Melissa wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. Did you know Mother used to lock me in my room when I disagreed with her? I'd forgotten. Just blocked it out. Told myself she was strict but loving. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. My therapist says it will take years to undo all the conditioning, to learn how to make decisions based on what I want instead of what Mother would approve of. Melissa looked up at him. I don't expect you to take me back. I know I destroyed that. But I want to be a good mother to Sophie. I want to learn how. Then keep showing up, Daniel said simply. Keep choosing her. That's all she needs. It's not all, though. She needs me to be strong, to protect her. And I don't know if I know how. You learn. Every day you learn. Daniel leaned forward. Mel, I'm not your enemy. I never was. I just want Sophie to grow up safe and loved. If you can be part of that, I'll support it. Tears slipped down Melissa's cheeks. I'm sorry. For all of it. For choosing my mother over you, over Sophie. For letting it get this bad before I saw the truth. I know. He didn't say he forgave her. Forgiveness would take time, if it came at all. But he acknowledged her effort, and for now, that was enough. The months passed. Winter gave way to spring, the ice on the lake melting into dark water. Daniel took Sophie fishing on weekends, teaching her how to bait a hook and cast a line. She was getting good at it, her small hands steadier now, her laughter coming easier. Melissa stayed consistent with her visits. She never mentioned Eleanor, never made excuses. She just showed up, and slowly, very slowly, Sophie started to trust her again. One afternoon in April, as the three of them sat at a diner eating burgers, Daniel had finally convinced Melissa that food could be enjoyed, not just analyzed. Sophie asked the question Daniel had been dreading. Daddy, will Grandma ever say sorry? The diner hummed around them. Conversations, the clatter of dishes, the hiss of the grill. Daniel looked at Melissa, who met his eyes and nodded slightly. This was his answer to give. I don't think she knows how, sweetheart. Sophie absorbed this, her expression serious. Is she still in jail? For a little while longer. And then she'll live somewhere else. But she won't be part of our lives. Daniel reached across the table to touch his daughter's hand. Is that okay with you? Sophie thought about it with the gravity only children can manage when dealing with adult problems. Finally, she said, then we don't need her. Relief washed over Daniel. That's right. We have each other, Sophie continued. And Mommy's getting better. Right, Mommy? Melissa's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. Right. I'm getting better. Then that's enough, Sophie decided, and went back to her burger as if she'd solved a mathematical equation. Daniel caught Melissa's eye across the table. She mouthed, thank you, and he nodded. They were a long way from okay. Might never be what they once were. But they were both parents to this remarkable little girl, and that was enough to build on. That evening, after dropping Melissa at her apartment, Daniel and Sophie drove home through the spring twilight. The trees were budding, the air smelled like rain and new growth, and the world felt full of possibility. Daddy, yeah, I love our family, even if it's different now. Daniel's throat tightened. Me too, Pumpkin. Me too. They pulled into the driveway of their small house. Inside, it was warm and safe, a place where Sophie could play in the hallway, could laugh loudly, could be a child without fear of punishment or pushback. Later, after Sophie was asleep, Daniel stood in her doorway, watching her breathe. She'd arranged all her stuffed animals around her pillow, creating a soft fortress. Her face in sleep was peaceful, unmarred by the tensions that had defined the past months. He'd done it, protected her, chosen her over peace, over his marriage, over the easier path of just going along to get along. His phone buzzed. A text from Tom. Divorce finalized. Papers are ready for pickup. Daniel stared at the message for a long moment, waiting to feel something, sadness, regret, loss. But mostly he felt relieved. The legal end of something that had ended emotionally months ago. He typed back, thanks. I'll come by tomorrow. Another text came through, this one from Melissa. Thank you for today. For letting me be part of her life, even after everything. I won't waste the chance. He believed her. She was trying, genuinely trying to be better. It didn't erase what had happened, didn't make the past months hurt less. But it was something. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of the lake and pine trees. Somewhere in the distance, a loon called, its cry echoing across the water. A year ago, even 6 months ago, Daniel couldn't have imagined this life. Divorced, single father, his daughter's grandmother in jail for child endangerment. It sounded like failure when you listed it out like that. But standing here in his daughter's doorway, watching her sleep safely, knowing she'd never again have to fear being pushed away or called a burden or made to feel small. This was victory. Quiet, costly, but real. He closed her door softly and went to his own room. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Melissa's continued recovery, Sophie's adjustment to a split household, the 1,000 small decisions that make up a life. But tonight, his daughter was safe. Tonight, she'd fallen asleep without tears, without fear, with a certain knowledge that her father would always choose her. And that, Daniel thought as he turned off the light, was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.